just like to hear from you the forecast for this project or the Smart Singapore, the population as it is, we have 5.8 million now. So maybe in 30 years or 50 years time, what would you guys foresee the population should be for this? Number two is like a rising sea level as what our Prime Minister has spoken about earlier on. And lastly about our CPF. Reason is most of us finance our houses, including especially HDB with the CPF. As it is now, it's 2.6%. So if this new scheme comes forward, I foresee that the increase in value shouldn't be too much, right? So how can we overcome? Would that be a negative value in the flats to offset from the retirement sum from our CPF over there?
Rising sea level. This has not been the issue of climate change and rising sea level has not been incorporated into this study. So that's a separate issue. I believe the Prime Minister has talked about a figure of $100 billion over 100 years, right? And he's talking about, mitigating sea level change by building dikes, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is separate from this study. I'd like to clarify that. And sorry, I didn't get your question. You say that, are you worried about a rise in CPF rates to finance this project? Was that your? Okay. So in that, I don't think there should be negative returns for your retirement, because if anything, the value of flats either going to be the same or it's going to be higher, right? So if they preserve your capital gains, essentially Singapore has had tremendous capital gains accruing to every single HDB owner in their flat, right? And this has been the way of sharing the prosperity of the economic miracle that has been in Singapore. And this prosperity through capital gains has accrued to almost every level of society, and in fact forms the bulk of the increase in wealth at the bottom 50% of a society. So it is a very key mechanism of sharing prosperity, increasing these capital gains, right? So here what we're doing is we're preserving these capital gains, or in fact extending them by bringing something closer to a freehold value that has a rebuilding value, a free rebuilding value embedded in it. Okay, so you're preserving the value of this real estate for existing citizens, while making the fact that you own land, because you own the land as government, you can provide new cheap housing available to your new citizens who want to get into housing, because you already own the land. No other country already owns the land. So they cannot make public housing available at the cost that we can, because we need only charge construction cost, right? So we are in this, like I said, the hard lifting has already been done by the Land Reform and Land Acquisition Act many years ago. So we need to capitalize on this asset as policymakers to deliver both affordable housing for the young and preserve the prosperity that the people who already have flats that have accrued to them, because this is their right as Singaporeans. That's the way to look at it.
Yeah, on the question of maximum population, I think first of all, I think the 10 million is crazy. Because I think the fourth industrial revolution actually implies we will need actually less people. So the question is going to be, there may be in the interim a necessity to increase the number of population, but basically the workforce. But as it transitions into the AI economy, then I think they will just be sent home.
Okay, can I say this? About the issue of terminal population, it's a very important one. And it's been raised again because our Prime Minister no less has hinted at a 10 million terminal population. Now, when we had the white paper quite a few years ago, we hinted at a population, not a terminal population, but a population in 2030 of 6.9 million, am I correct? And there was tremendous resistance to that figure, sufficient political resistance such that the Prime Minister in his closing remarks on this in Parliament said, it should be our aim to keep the terminal population, that means to say in year X, 2050, 2060 and beyond, well below 6.9 million. I'm quoting him and his words, right? If I, as an economist, do the numbers, I find that it is very feasible. First of all, it's very difficult to maintain a decent rate of growth without population at least growing to 6 to 6.5 million. Okay, but if we maintain a disciplined rate of immigration, if we follow the immigration policies, let's say, of a country like West Germany, right, which has a very high productivity, which is an extremely competitive country, the immigration rates are pretty controlled, except for this Syrian thing, pretty controlled. We can, if we take a labor force growth rate of less than 1%, end up with a terminal population less than 6.9, around 6.5 million, and we can have pretty high productivity growth. And Keng Soon has made the point that with AI, etc., and with a configuration into smart cities, we can have high quality growth because we can have productivity growth driven by productivity growth and not labor force growth. Total growth is simply the sum of labor force growth plus productivity growth. So the more productivity growth you have, the less labor force growth you need. To achieve a population of 6.9, which I think is 6.5, which I think is the maximum tolerable population for Singapore, my humble opinion, you do need that high productivity growth implied in our smart cities, right? And you do need immigration discipline not to repeat the mistakes that we did in the last, in 1990s and 2000s, letting in 1.2 million unskilled and semi-skilled workers that set the stage for population. And if we continue that track, population will be 10 million and more. So we have a choice. We can choose to have a more disciplined immigration, a more high productivity, high quality growth, and be like a country like Germany, be like Switzerland, high quality, high value added country. Or we can be like Dubai, right? You just let in as many people as possible and you maximize growth with all its attendant social difficulties. Imagine managing a population of 10 million people in Singapore. To me, I think that would be disastrous.